Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Amaxra's Tech Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about cloud backup and the 6 critical reasons why you need Office 365 backup. My name's Thane Belknap, and I'm a project manager here at Amaxra. And today, I'm joined by Jeannie Kroll, Director of Public Cloud Solutions at Veeam. Thanks for joining me today, Jeannie.
Thanks, Thane. All right. All good. So everyone should be able to see my slides. So here today to talk to you about 6 reasons why you should back up your Office 365 environment. So first, let's talk a little bit about the overall market. When we look at workloads most likely to move to the cloud today, Office productivity is by far the largest. You also see CRM, ERP, your email, HR functions, finance, accounting, and cybersecurity controls. So if you're moving all of these things to the cloud, those are all very mission critical workloads that you absolutely want to make sure as a company you're protecting. When we look at cyber attacks, they really most often target Microsoft Office. So look at the distribution of exploits here in terms of percentages. Microsoft Office is almost 73% of cyber attacks. And why is it that it's targeting this particular application? The main reason why is there's a lot of sensitive data that everyone is keeping there. So it's data, it's customer information, it's financial information. So those are very target-rich environments, and Microsoft Office is the application that most of us live and breathe in every day at work. So when we're in the office, this is the application that we're most commonly using. If you issue an attack against that, it's the most critical application to a lot of day-to-day operations. And that puts you in a very rough position as a company in a way that you need to protect yourself from so that no one is locking that down and stopping your overall business productivity. But despite the fact that it is such a mission critical application, 76% of businesses are still unprotected. So when we ask organizations what's their primary protection strategy, we find that today about 57% of them aren't backing this up. And so today I want to talk a little bit about why you should be backing it up and how you can do that. So when we take a look at what top analyst firms have to say here, IDC comes out and says that the ultimate responsibility of data protection lies with the customer or the data owner. So ultimately, that's you. It's not saying that in any way Office 365 itself is not a beautiful product. It absolutely is. My company uses it. I use it personally. It's just not designed to do backup. So we're going to talk a little bit about where the lines of responsibility lay. So when we look at the overall shared responsibility model today, a lot of people think about, when they think about backup for Office 365 or other portions of public cloud, then Microsoft takes care of it, or whoever the cloud vendor is takes care of it. So that's the customer perception, is that there's a big, happy Office 365 bubble, and within that is the infrastructure that provides the service, as well as your data, all protected in the bubble of Office 365. But the reality of it is a little bit different. So like I said, here's the customer perception still. But really, what exists within the Office 365 bubble is Microsoft's commitment to provide uptime of a service. So that's the service level agreement that they have with you as their end customer, is that they are going to make sure that your data is available to you in the form that you provide it to them in. And that's the sticking point, is what form are you providing it to them in? That's most important. And that's where your responsibility comes in. So Microsoft can only provide back to you data that you give them. And as that data changes, sometimes it changes in ways that you don't want it to. But if that's happening, that's your responsibility, not Microsoft's, because it's ultimately still your data. So the reality as a customer is that while Microsoft takes care of all of the infrastructure for you and provides that service, make sure that your data is available, you still have to be responsible for the protection and long-term retention of your data, just like you did if you were running Exchange on-prem, or SharePoint on-prem for that matter. So nothing really changes. You have all of those same responsibilities in terms of protecting your data when you move it to a cloud environment. So when we take a look at the shared responsibility model, let's look at what Microsoft's responsibility is and then what your responsibility is. So there's a few different categories, and the primary responsibility when we start looking at services like Office 365, Microsoft's responsibility here is maintaining the global infrastructure. So they run huge data centers, that house all of this infrastructure. All of that helps protect the uptime of the cloud service that they're providing to you. your responsibility is still to maintain access and control of your data residing in Office 365. In terms of supporting technology, Microsoft offers Office 365 data replication. So that's the data center to data center geo-redundancy, where they're going to make copies or replicas of the data. But once again, that's based on the form that you provide the data in. And if you're pursuing a true backup strategy, your responsibility for data protection is that you have a copy of your data that's stored in a different location. And that can be a lot of different locations. Like it can be a copy on-prem, it can be a copy in Azure, anywhere that you want to put it, that's an option, but you should be maintaining a separate copy of it. And then Microsoft also provides things like, the recycle bins, that you have limited short-term data loss recovery. If you delete something, it goes to the recycle bin, and you can get it back within a small window, but it has no point in time recovery. As an end customer, though, your responsibility is full data retention. So short-term and long-term retention. That means it helps you fill in any policy gaps that can exist. It also allows for both granular and point-in-time recovery options. So if you're not familiar with point-in-time recovery, that just means, hey, we suffered some sort of incident, whether that's a ransomware attack, whether it was accidental deletion, and I need to roll my entire environment back to prior to that event. So let's recreate what it looked like 3 days ago or 60 days ago. That's what point-in-time recovery really means. When we look at security, there's both infrastructure level, so where Microsoft's responsible, right, because they have physical security of their servers, logical security, application level security, and then there's data level. So when you look at internal within your organization, there's accidental deletions that can happen. Maybe you need to let an employee go and they're upset. They can do a lot of different things in your environment depending upon the access that they have before they leave. And potential evidence tampering in case of legal situations. And then external, you get your ransomware, malware, hackers, any type of rogue applications. Then finally, from a regulation standpoint, Microsoft has a role as a data processor. So when you look at all the compliance that they maintain, they're going to be HIPAA compliant, Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, but that's in a specific role capacity. All of those types of certifications and regulations still have data owner sets of responsibilities as well. And so it's important that you're meeting all of those demands from a compliance standpoint as your role as a data owner. So if you're not backing up your Office 365 data, you're open to kind of 4 major areas of exposure. So you ultimately have limited access and control of your own data, potential regulatory exposures, possible security vulnerabilities, and retention policy gaps and data loss dangers. So when we get into 6 reasons why you want to think about, outside of what we've just outlined, let's dig a little deeper into the 6 reasons why you should be considering backup for your Office 365 environment. So the first, like we talked about, accidental deletion. Someone goes and they delete something and they don't necessarily realize that they deleted it until it's too late. So you need the ability to be able to get things back. Retention policies in the product, as well as in the way you set them up, change quite frequently. So if there's any confusion or gaps in retention policies, meaning either something that should be retained or something that shouldn't be retained, depending upon how you set up those policies, you can open yourself up for exposure that way. We talked about malicious insiders or departing employees. If you have the wrong person with the right access, they can do a lot of damage. They can set all of your retention policies to 0. And if those things are not caught in the right window, that data loss is irreversible. You have your external security threats. So ransomware that exists, rogue applications that you're open to. And these are situations where if you do get hit with ransomware, you want the ability to very quickly recreate your environment the way it was before the attack was implemented. Different legal and compliance requirements. So going back to your role as the data owner, it's important that not only is Microsoft compliant, but that your own data practices are compliant. And then finally, managing hybrid deployments and migrations. So it's important to have, backups as you go through a migration, or if you are still running some portion of your environment in Office 365, as well as a portion of your environment on-prem, you want the ability to seamlessly transition data back and forth. So when we look at attacks, people say, okay, well, this sounds scary, but how often do these things really happen? And so asking people, what form of data loss have they experienced within the cloud? 37% of people surveyed said that they have experienced either user errors or accidental deletions that led to data loss. 18% have had security threats either from inside or outside. 19% have had problems with retention policy gaps where there was confusion, they thought something was protected, it really wasn't. And 20% of people said, they haven't had data loss, but 20% of people said that they haven't. That means that 80% of people have experienced some sort of data loss from these types of situations in the past. So it is important that we do think about it and that we are implementing solid data protection practices to help protect, own, and control our data. So I think it gets confusing in terms of what Microsoft actually keeps. So here's some charts that help you better understand what that looks like in Office 365. So if you have inbox or folder data, it's ultimately kept in your inbox for up to 2 years before being moved to archive. Deleted items, so that's your recycle bin, exists for 30 days before it's permanently deleted. And these are out-of-box settings. Company can go in and change these settings as well, but many people just use what comes standard with the product. If you have auto-archive data set at 1 month, it's moved to archive after 1 month. And then your deleted SharePoint online sites and items, they go through a first stage and then a second stage, which is permanently deleted after 90 days. Same really for OneDrive for business files, also the 90-day cutoff. And then if an employee leaves the company, they are permanently deleted after 30 days unless you maintain them for some reason as an active user. So if something happens and you discover on day 31 that employee is no longer an active user, but you needed something that they were working on, there's no way to get that back without some sort of backup policy in place. The other key that's really important to think about here is Microsoft did some research, and they actually found that the average length of time from the point that data is compromised to when it was discovered by customers is over 140 days. So that 140-day mark is outside of the default settings, which exist for only 30 to 90 days across almost all of these areas. So if you don't even know about the data compromise, until months after the default settings, you have a problem at that point that you can't recover from. So if you take a look at all of these different options, if you do have a backup product, my company has one that I'll talk a little bit about, being backup for Microsoft Office 365. It's more than simply filling these gaps. It helps you provide access and control to all of your data across Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. Storing it in one location with fast, granular recovery that really helps protect you when you do find some sort of exposure has happened. So quickly want to talk a little bit about what Microsoft says. So here's Julia White's Microsoft Office 365 Trust Center. And Microsoft itself says, with Office 365, it's your data, you own it, you control it. That also means you have to protect it. And then if you look at Microsoft's TechNet blog, I know it's a really ugly slide, but it's their blog, not mine. It says that despite multiple options for deleted item recovery, point-in-time restoration of mailbox items is out of scope of the service. So what that means is you cannot do that point-in-time restore that says, hey, I need to roll this back to what it looked like 3 hours ago, or what it looked like yesterday, or what it looked like 35 days ago. So that's a really important part of any backup strategy, is the ability to recreate your environment. And Office 365 itself does not provide that option today. So when we take a quick look at how Veeam compares to Microsoft native capabilities, and this is the capabilities when you look at Office 365 E3 and above. So where you get into unlimited archiving and litigation hold capabilities. So the challenges still that exist, even when you have those things, is that Microsoft isn't ultimately the data owner, nor do they want to be, nor should they be. You as a customer are still you own your data. And compliancy requires that as a business, you have to have complete and access to that data, and it has to be verifiable. So depending upon the regulations that your company is subject to, if someone comes in and does an audit, you have to be able to always show that. So you need to ensure that you can. Archiving, although wonderful and it has many purposes, it's not a backup because it's not a separate copy. It's just moving the data once it ages out to a secondary storage location, while backup is still that copy that you want to maintain. Replicated copies constantly updated from a single source. So when we look at replication that exists within Office 365 as well, if you hard delete something, if it's corrupted in any way or changed, all the copies, you're feeding that data to Microsoft, and Microsoft is saying that we are going to replicate it for you. So ultimately, both replication and backup are very important pieces of a data protection strategy, and you need to have them both. And then litigation hold is absolutely something that is necessary sometimes and a great use case, but just not for backup. Because what you're doing when you put mailboxes on any sort of legal hold, it ultimately increases your business risk. You're using a legal solution for an IT problem. If you go in and tell, a corporate compliance officer that it's great, we put litigation hold on all of our mailboxes, they are going to keel over and die because it's a very dangerous business practice that actually introduces risk to your business. So if you use a backup product like Veeam, it's ultimately putting your org in charge of your data, which is what you really want. You want complete access and control of your data because it's one of your company's most important assets. You're getting backup, not just archiving. So you are getting that separate copy that you need because that copy is what helps you recover. And that backup is in a separate location. So we always talk about kind of the 3-2-1 rule. You want 3 copies of your data in 2 different media and 1 offsite. That offsite can be Azure, can be on-prem, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. You're getting industry-leading recovery, so you can quickly recover at a granular level and at scale. So if you need to recover a couple emails, it's not that difficult. If you need to recover a couple hundred mailboxes, it becomes much more challenging. And then today we do have 84,000 organizations that are using Veeam's backup product for Office 365, because they've had these experiences and realize that this is technology that they need to implement for their organization to fully own and protect their data. So that brings me to kind of my final slide here. So if you found what I've had to say today to be interesting, thought-provoking, you want to check it out for yourself, Veeam does have a free community edition product that you can go download today, take a look at, for up to 10 users for your environment.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Yeah.
I think all that information was very wonderful and useful. I know we have a lot of clients out there that think, similar to what you had talked about, that just because that they're using a cloud product, that they don't need to worry about backup. And I think this was a great explanation of why it's really important for all users across the board to really invest in that IT strategy and security process of having backup available. So as always, if you've had any questions about any of the topics that we've discussed today, feel free to reach out to technology@amaxra.com. If we don't know the answers here at Amaxra, we're happy to reach out to Jeannie and her team and get those questions answered for you as well there. Thanks again for joining us today. As always, we'd love to get your feedback. And if you're interested in future Tech Talks, go ahead and sign up for notifications to get those. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks again for joining me, Jeannie. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your week.